The old bookstore on the corner of Maple and Vine had always intrigued me. It stood as a relic from another time, defiant amid the modern glass buildings that dominated the cityscape. On a particularly gray and rainy Saturday, I decided to finally venture inside. The bell above the door tinkled softly as I entered, the smell of aged paper and leather immediately enveloping me. The store was dimly lit, with rows of towering bookshelves casting long shadows. My footsteps echoed on the wooden floor as I wandered deeper into the labyrinth of literature. The wooden floors creaked under my feet, and the air felt thick with history. At the back of the store, I discovered a section marked Antiquities. The books here were older, their spines cracked and titles barely legible. My fingers brushed over the faded covers, my curiosity piqued by the mysterious aura they exuded. As I scanned the shelves, one book caught my eye. It was a small leather-bound journal with no title, its cover adorned only with a faint, almost invisible symbol. I pulled it from the shelf and opened it, revealing handwritten entries in an elegant, old-fashioned script. The first entry was dated 1864 and detailed the musings of a man named Nathaniel Hawthorne, though not the famous author. Nathaniel was a local historian, obsessed with uncovering the secrets of a graveyard that didn't appear on any maps. Intrigued, I began to read. June 12th, 1864. Today, I ventured once more into the Pine Hollow woods, seeking the graveyard that is said to hold the restless spirits of those wronged in life. The locals deny its existence, yet I have seen the gravestones with my own eyes. There, in the depths of the forest, lies the final resting place of souls who cannot find peace. They whisper to me in the night, begging for justice. My heart quickened. I had always been fascinated by tales of the supernatural, but this journal seemed to offer more than just stories. It hinted at something real, something I could uncover. I decided to buy the journal, eager to delve deeper into Nathaniel's findings. As I paid the elderly shopkeeper, he gave me a curious look. "You know, many people have looked for that graveyard," he said, his voice gravelly. "None have found it, and those who came close never returned the same. Be careful, young lady." I smiled politely, but dismissed his warning. I was determined to uncover the truth. That evening, I curled up in my apartment with the journal, reading late into the night. The rain tapped against my window as I pored over Nathaniel's entries, each one more chilling than the last. The journal spoke of eerie phenomena, whispers in the dark, apparitions of wronged souls, and a pervasive sense of dread that hung over the graveyard like a shroud. Nathaniel's obsession with the place grew with each entry, and I found myself equally captivated. August 3rd, 1864. I have found it. The graveyard lies beyond a hidden path, marked only by the symbols of those who seek justice. The air is cold, even in the height of summer, and the silence is deafening. I feel their eyes upon me, watching, waiting. They know I am here to help, but their anger is palpable. I must tread carefully. The more I read, the more I felt an inexplicable pull toward the graveyard. I decided I needed to see it for myself. The next morning, I packed a bag with essentials, a flashlight, a camera, a notebook, and the journal. I dressed in sturdy clothes and hiking boots, preparing for whatever the forest might throw at me. The drive to Pine Hollow Woods was uneventful, the gray skies reflecting my somber mood. As I approached the town closest to the woods, I stopped at a diner to ask for directions. The locals were friendly enough until I mentioned the graveyard. Their expressions turned wary, and they exchanged uneasy glances. "You're looking for trouble, miss," one old man said, shaking his head. "That place isn't meant to be found." I thanked them and left, undeterred. I drove to the edge of the woods and parked my car, the path ahead barely visible through the thick underbrush. With Nathaniel's journal as my guide, I started my journey into the forest. The deeper I went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The trees were gnarled and twisted, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Every step I took seemed to echo in the unnatural silence, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The path was narrow, barely more than a deer trail, and the underbrush tugged at my clothes and scratched my exposed skin. I pressed on, my determination fueled by the journal's descriptions and my own insatiable curiosity. Each step felt like an intrusion into a world forgotten by time. As the hours passed, the light filtering through the canopy grew dimmer, casting long, eerie shadows on the forest floor. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My heart beat faster, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder more frequently. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees crowding together as if to bar my passage. I paused to catch my breath, taking a moment to consult the journal. Nathaniel had mentioned a hidden path marked by symbols. I scanned the area, looking for any signs. At first, I saw nothing but the twisted roots and dense foliage, but then my eyes caught a faint marking on a tree trunk, a small, barely discernible symbol carved into the bark. My pulse quickened. I was on the right track. I followed the markings, each one leading me deeper into the forest. The air grew colder, and an eerie silence enveloped me. Even the birds seemed to avoid this part of the woods. The path led me to a clearing, and there I saw it. The graveyard. It was exactly as Nathaniel had described. Gravestones cracked and covered in moss. The names barely legible. The air was colder here, and an eerie silence enveloped the place. I took a deep breath and stepped through the rusted gates. The ground beneath my feet felt unstable, as if it could give way at any moment. I walked slowly, taking in the sight of the forgotten graves. Each one seemed to tell a story of pain and suffering. I spent a long time exploring the graveyard, taking notes and photographs. The air grew colder as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the gravestones, and I felt an inexplicable sense of urgency. My flashlight beam flickered, casting eerie shadows on the gravestones. I could barely see a few feet ahead, the darkness closing in around me. I felt a cold draft brush against my skin, sending shivers down my spine. As I wandered deeper into the graveyard, my eyes were drawn to a particularly old and decrepit section. The gravestones here were almost entirely obscured by moss and ivy, their inscriptions worn away by time. I brushed away the overgrowth from one gravestone, squinting to read the faded letters. My breath caught in my throat. The gravestone bore a name I recognized from Nathaniel's journal. Abigail Pierce, a young woman who had been falsely accused of witchcraft and burned at the stake. I felt a pang of sorrow as I imagined Abigail's suffering. I moved to the next gravestone, uncovering the name of a man who had been betrayed by his closest friend and left to die. The next told the story of a child abandoned in the woods, succumbing to the elements alone and forgotten. As I continued, the weight of the injustice felt almost too much to bear. I paused, trying to collect my thoughts. The air around me seemed to hum with a restless energy, the whispers growing louder and more insistent. Suddenly, I stumbled upon a newer gravestone, one that seemed out of place among the others. The name etched into it made my blood run cold. Emma Collins. Beneath the name was a date of death. Today's date. I stared at the gravestone, my mind racing. How could this be? Was it some kind of sick joke? I looked around, but the graveyard was silent and empty, save for the whispers that now seemed to echo my own name. This can't be real, I thought, panic rising in my chest. It's just a coincidence. It has to be. As I took a step back, the ground beneath my feet began to shift. I heard the whispers all around me, growing louder and more insistent. They called my name, begging for my help. I turned to leave, but the path I had come from was gone, replaced by a wall of trees. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I spun around, but no one was there. My breath came in short, ragged gasps as I tried to make sense of it all. The darkness seemed to press in on me, the gravestones looming like silent sentinels. Then a figure moved toward me, its form becoming clearer in the dim light. It was a woman, her eyes hollow and her face twisted in anguish. Abigail? I thought, recognizing her from the visions I had seen earlier. But how could she be here, now, in front of me? The whispers grew louder, and the air around me seemed to crackle with energy. The figure reached out a hand, her fingers brushing against my cheek. I felt a surge of cold, and my vision blurred. "Help us," she whispered, her voice echoing in my mind. "We need you." I felt a sudden pull, as if the ground was shifting beneath me. The world around me spun, and I felt myself being drawn toward the gravestone with my name on it. I tried to resist, but the pull was too strong. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the date on the gravestone. Today's date, glowing faintly in the moonlight.